Hi guys, welcome back to the channel. We are joined this afternoon by producer Andy Barnes. Hi Andy.
Hi.
How are you doing?
Very well, thank you. Yeah, not bad at all. Very hot. But apart from that, I'm good.
I think kind of we've been saying people in like Liverpool, Manchester, Scotland, it's actually quite nice, quite kind of normal. Yeah, it's like 22 degrees. It's just down here, it's, you know, a little bit like
down here,
winter. Yeah. So Andy, obviously most people know you as one of the producers of Six. Obviously you're a producer of Global Musicals and also Perfect Pitch, both of which you started with Wendy. So tell us a little bit about your background. How did you get into producing? What inspired the two of you to start Perfect Pitch?
It was sort of an accident that I got into producing, actually, and a literal accident where I was in a different job and I broke my wrist in the line of my work, and as a result, a friend who was an actor said, "I want to go into directing. Do you want to help me put on a show?" And I kind of stupidly said, "Yeah, I'm not doing anything. I'll give it a go. And what do you need?" And he said, "Oh, I'm just going to find a venue and just put on this show." He said, "I've always wanted to do a show called The Wiz, which is a kind of very cool soul funk version of The Wizard of Oz." And I kind of said, "Yeah, go on then, I'll give you a hand." And we sort of slightly bit off more than we can chew and ended up doing it at the Hackney Empire as our kind of first show ever. But they were so supportive and brilliant, and because of that, it kind of meant that I'd just been bitten by the bug, really. And then I left my other career and decided to go back to college. So I went to Central School of Speech and Drama for a year, did an MA, which was interesting because I'd never done a BA, so that was quite fun. Trying to learn to be a student in my mid-30s. And then and then I kind of it just went from there, really. Perfect Pitch was born out of a desire to find new stuff and tell new stories, because The Wiz was great. It's a well-known story. What I liked about it was its contemporary feel and contemporary take, and we gave it a very contemporary makeover. It wasn't like the sort of 70s or was it 80s? I can't remember now. Film version. It was a very kind of up-to-date version. The Yellow Brick Road was a street dance team and stuff like that. It was very kind of contemporary at the time, and I think. And I couldn't really find anything. Just searching the catalogs, the licensing catalogs, I couldn't really find anything that really was exciting me. So I stupidly put a call out for people to send me their new musicals, and because there wasn't much going on in the world of new musicals at that time, I suddenly just got inundated with everybody's back catalogs, really, and then a few new ones and a few modern ones, and at that point, Wendy and I were sort of sifting through all the scripts together and kind of going, "Oh, this one's quite nice," or "Some of this is good and some of it's not great, and it could do with a bit of work," or whatever. And in the end, we decided to sort of just put on bits of about a dozen of them, and see if anyone wanted to work with us on the ones that they liked. And that was kind of how Perfect Pitch got born.
Amazing. And then Global is kind of much more recent sort of evolution, maybe, of Perfect Pitch.
Yeah, kind of. I think it was always the desire. So we did produce a couple of shows under Perfect Pitch, but we never really had the infrastructure to do it, or the facility to do it, or the money to do it. So we did Lift at Soho back in 2013. We were associate producers on The Go Between in the West End in 2016, I think that was. And both of those were shows that had come out of Perfect Pitch. And Global was really a mechanism, I suppose, to be able to produce some of the shows that we were passionate about and believed in. And from the Perfect Pitch catalogue, that was the plan. And we, in the I think the June of 2020, so in the June of 2017, I literally just set it all up, and we set it up through SEIS, which is a incentive for people to invest in a new company, tax efficient scheme. And so I'd got the first couple of investors sort of willing to support us and back us, and then I went to Edinburgh and saw Six, which obviously wasn't a Perfect Pitch show, but just kind of went, "Oh, this totally fits our remit of what we want to do." what we enjoy doing, and it's very contemporary, and it's got something to say, and it's kick-ass pop tunes and everything that, you know, we love. So we kind of saw it and went, let's do that one first, just because that was purely timing. But what it does mean is that's kind of slightly taken over a little bit, because it's just gone so well that we've got a couple of other projects in the pipeline, as you well know, that are hopefully going to be coming to fruition once this crazy world gets back to some semblance of normality.
Six is a little bit of a phenomenon in the sense of in the speed of its success, really, from, you know, Edinburgh Festival to the Olivier's to Broadway within, you know, less than 3 years. Can you tell us a little bit more about that process? I mean, you know, look at Hamilton, took 8 years really to get to the product that we see now, and for Six, it's kind of almost been, you know, fast tracked through the process. So can you tell us a little bit about from when you found it looked very different, didn't it? And there have been quite a few revisions of the show since you first saw it in Edinburgh.
Yeah, I mean, I think so. We saw it in Edinburgh, and then Kenny, who's our co-producer, one of our co-producers, saw it in October in Cambridge. And we, I think the reason it's gone so quickly is partly because you've got two producers who are just quite proactive in finding opportunity. That's not to say others aren't, but I just think sometimes, you know, one waits for the right theatre, or one waits for the offer to come in, or the artist to be available, or whatever it is. Whereas with this, I think, you know, Kenny had a theatre that he was, the arts theatre that he was already doing something in, and he said, why don't we do something on Monday nights? And Wendy and I were very sure that the show should go back to Edinburgh, because we've done Edinburgh for the last 15 years, and we knew it would really work coming back as a kind of bigger, better version, if you like, or more enhanced version, and in a bigger venue where more people could see it. So we, and between those two sort of initial ideas of what could happen with it, we sort of thought, well, let's do a showcase, invite all the Edinburgh venues to the showcase on the Monday nights, invite a few regional venues and tour venues, and then go from there. And I think the showcase went so well that everybody in Edinburgh wanted it, and a lot of regional theatres were happy to kind of take a chance on it. And then, you know, it sort of went from there, really.
And what have been the main challenges from a producing perspective of its kind of exponential growth? Like suddenly, I say suddenly, it probably didn't feel very sudden to you, but from going from kind of the Edinburgh limited arts run to then an extended arts run, UK tour, ships, Australia, Chicago, Broadway. Like from your perspective, obviously, I know that you work with Kenny, so it's not just, you're not producing this by yourselves, but what, from a producing perspective, what have been the main challenges of its growth?
On a personal level, or challenges for the show?
Both, I think.
I mean, personally, it's been about capacity. You know, Wendy and I are working parents, 2 young kids, and a company called Perfect Pitch, which we're already running. So to some degree, we sort of anticipated that there might be, you know, a couple or 3 days a week on Global, and a couple of 3 days a week on Perfect Pitch for me initially, which was what we planned, and then it sort of took over a little bit, which meant the additional resources that we needed weren't there, because you know, the thing about producing is you don't get any money for quite some time as a producer. You know, you don't get paid in the same way as you do as a performer or you know, member of the team. So we kind of we didn't have the cash to employ anybody else. We had limited funding to do what we needed to do. So that was a real struggle. It just meant that, you know, I was working silly hours just to kind of get stuff done, but all with the belief that one day it would all be okay, and we'd, you know, get our payoff, because we did have that belief in the show. And then I think the learning curve, because for me, you know, this was our first show of this scale, you know, and whilst I think everybody knows, every producer sort of believes they know a rough way of how they would do it and how they would deal with it, there's so much more stuff that just I hadn't even considered would even come into our world. You know, long-term rights issues, you know, exploitation in different territories, and you know, how you safeguard you know, everybody, your performers, everyone else. You know, I've been to a health and safety consultation meeting. I mean, who knew those things were even a thing? But you know, there's a whole big other world of work that is involved beyond what's seen as producers. You don't just sit in the room and go, yeah, I love that, I don't like that, I love that. You know, if only that was all we did. But it kind of, yeah, but it's been brilliant. You know, I say all of that with the sense of every bit of learning has been really exciting. And from a show's point of view, I think I would say the creative team have probably had to deal with, you know, a moving feast of visualization and opportunity that usually happens over a much more elongated period of time. Usually not, you know, usually with a much longer lead up time. So what tended to happen is they were in the middle of something whilst having to sort out the next thing. So they're putting it on, or they're in a rehearsal period whilst also having to sign off on designs for the next version on a ship or in Chicago or whatever it is. So that was quite hard, I think, from their point of view, and obviously us having to manage that, you know, making sure that they're all okay and coping and everything else is, you know, one of the hardest things I think we've had to deal with. And they're all really young, you know, as well, and they're busy and wanting to do other things, of course, you know. And as you well know, you know, Toby and Lucy are hugely sought after at the moment.
I can't think why. So we've got one question coming already. Guys, please feel free to ask questions. We've only got Andy for another 40 minutes, so feel free to pick his brains and ask questions about any element of producing. We can talk about six. We're going to talk a little bit more about perfect pitch in a minute. We've had a great question in from Nayara. If you do want to ask questions or interact in any way with this Q&A, you do need to be subscribed to the CCO YouTube channel. So click subscribe and then you can ask any questions you like. So we'll go on to Nayara's question. She says, if you're looking at raising funds for a production, what are some of the ways that you look at that? How much do grants play into that, and what are some other potential sources of funding? It's a really great question.
Yeah, and so many possible answers. I think it ultimately depends on what it is. But if you take what it is and where it's going to happen, because I think depending on why you're doing something, depends on where you might go to for funding. So if it's a commercial production, then you're looking at investment generally, sometimes sponsorship or partnership that allows you to kind of find funding or resources or savings, I suppose, on your bottom line. So you might, for example, do a really good deal with a lighting company that because it's for so many weeks, they'll do you a deal on it, and therefore you're not paying as much as if you're just doing 1 week in a theatre somewhere else. That's sort of the commercial world, generally investment raising. In the subsidized world or the non-profit world, then grants do play quite a big part, I would suggest. We're a regularly funded organisation, an MPO, National Portfolio Organisation, in the Arts Council's world, and that means we are charged with delivering a set of objectives that support their main goals within the United Kingdom, or within England rather, for art and communities. So there are a number of things that we do as part of our everyday work for Perfect Pitch that allow us to access that funding, that means that we can use that funding to do some of the work we do. But that's very separate to global, and the two don't cross over. Perfect Pitch is about development of the artists and development of the work. It's less about getting your skills better, but it's about working with artists to develop shows and to get those shows as good as they can possibly be, so they stand the best chance of surviving wherever they go, whether that's the commercial sector or the non-profit sector or subsidized sector. So grants help, but grants tend to have their own remit of what they're there for. And if you're going to PRS, for example, they have certain schemes that allow you to access if you're, I can't think of some of the initiatives at the moment, but I think there's one for women making music, and there's others for between 16 and 25-year-olds and so on. So again, it depends who you're working with and what you're trying to achieve and what outcomes you're hoping to achieve. And then also it depends if you're a charity. individuals, I think, are probably best served through the Arts Council at the moment, with the recently reopened fund for project grants, basically. So if you're looking to put on a production or direct a production and you feel that it has a public-facing output that allows you to kind of, I'd say, tick their boxes. That always makes it sound mercenary, but I mean actually achieve their goals, you know, in terms of what they're asking for in giving back. So if they're giving you money, what do they get back? And that is usually that it engages the community, it offers opportunity or access to people are not usually able to access the arts, things like that. So that's sort of quite a generic overview, but does that help?
It's good. They're good answers. So in terms of perfect pitch, this is, again, maybe a little bit of a broad question, but what criteria are you looking for in a piece that, you know, comes into your inbox and someone sends through, I don't know, a treatment and some songs? You know, what is it that makes you and Wendy kind of go, we're going to take this on? And do you ever disagree creatively or artistically on the projects that you want to take on?
Good question. So the first part of that is would I want to go and see it, and why would I want to go and see it? And depending on where it's at, sometimes you're just given an idea and someone goes, I want to write a show about this, and what do you think? And I can tell you within 30 seconds as to whether or not it's something I'd be likely to want to go and see, and that's without hearing or seeing any content. That's usually based on the idea, and I think generally it's acknowledged that the idea is key and is, you know, the most important thing. We've always tried to find subjects that we think speak to an audience today, as opposed to just necessarily have an important resonance. So for example, you know, Florence Nightingale, we've had Florence Nightingale the musical, just by way of an example. It's not something like I admire the woman, incredible stuff. It's not a story I need to hear about now in my world, unless you presented it to me with an incredibly contemporary and effective way of making sure that story resonated now with today's audiences. So that's kind of how we look at it. Do we disagree? Yes. Now we're a bit further along and we have more shows. I think we now both have to love it, because everything takes so much time and is so much hard work that we've sort of collectively agreed that if we don't both love it, we'll just leave it, because we can't take on something that dominates your life so much otherwise. Early on, we took on a few. I mean, you know, Lift. Wendy was a massive advocate of Lift. Absolutely adored it. I couldn't quite get it at first. I mean, I'm really glad we did, because I love it now. But I, you know, couldn't quite get my head around it. Whereas, you know, Wendy saw that straight away and went, "This is brilliant." So, you know, we have had our disagreement or differences in the past, but generally, you know, we've run with it if we think there's something in it. And I have to say, you know, not every show, you know, bites you on the bum straight away. I think some of them are growers, and you go, you know what, there really is something in this, and that can often take a few months, and it's getting to know the creative team, or it's working out whether what they're delivering you or offering you is actually what they're trying to do. Sometimes you realize that it's just they're trying to get this out, but they can't get it out, and we can maybe help that. But if we understand the intention, so it's not always about what's on the page in front of you, or you know, on the record. It's more about what's the ambition, what they're aiming for, and why do we think someone would want to come and see it.
So just a great answer. On that kind of subject of people writing to you, obviously on your website it still says for people to write in, even though you're really busy, so I'm going to go with that. But if people are contacting you, I think a lot of people have been quite creative through this time. A lot of people now are inspired to write new musicals, new British musicals in particular. What's the format? What is it that you want to see in terms of a presentation if someone's coming to you with a show or even a concept that they've put together?
Are you talking about global or perfect pitch here?
Perfect pitch, yeah. Okay.
So I think perfect pitch at the moment, our submissions are actually closed, but that's you know, that's only due again to capacity at the moment of not being able to to do justice to taking anything else on. It's not like we're not interested. It's just that we have six new musicals in development at various stages. We have another 6 or so that we're just about to sign off on a licensing deal for, and you know, there's a lot of other work that goes on. And what we felt was we wanted to do stick shows really well, and make sure we gave them the proper time and so on to get them as good as they can be, rather than just having loads of shows and not really doing any of them quite well enough. Or and also we have limited funds, you know, in that world. Whilst Global is fortunate enough to be able to support it a little bit now, and you know, we do sort of chuck a bit of money that way. You know, generally we have a finite pot from the Arts Council plus whatever else we can raise that limits really what you can do and how many workshops, readings, dramaturgical things we can do. So how would we want it presented? I think, I mean, we ask for an outline and maybe a couple of supporting songs. We tend to be interested in the idea and a sample. That's kind of what we're always looking for, really. I think if you've written it and it's hard for you to share until you've written it, it's probably not going to be one for us. It's more like to be, you just need to find a producer who loves it in the same way as you do. We're very much collaborators, and very much we help guide the process. We help feed in what we think an audience might want, what we think a venue might want, where we see it sitting, what theatres might like it, who might like it as artistic directors of that theatre, and generally guide the process so that can be informed within the writing process, as opposed to just constantly pitching an idea once it's finished or once it's written. Most artistic directors are the same. They want to feel a sense of involvement and ownership that allows them to invest in it, because they still feel there's fluidity in the process. I think most producers are becoming more like that as well. It's quite rare now that somebody says yes if you ask them to put your show on. I think it's more a case of, you know, we're interested in working with writers and creatives to find the best place to put a show on and discover what the show even is together.
So a lot of people kind of maybe have created something and don't really know where to start in terms of workshopping it. Obviously, we're in slightly different times at the moment. We can't necessarily all physically be together in the room. But do you have any advice for people on taking, you know, perhaps work that's a little bit more at kind of a conceptual stage even, and kind of developing that and workshopping that?
Do we have some advice for them, did you say? Yeah, I mean, I think the key thing is be open and be honest, because the hardest thing, it's like anything. If you put an outfit on and you go out for the day, you hope everyone goes, "Oh, you look great," but sometimes when you don't, you know, acknowledge it. And I think it's kind of we have no expectation that writers or creators will get it right first time, particularly if you're an emerging and new writer, which is who we tend to work with. But the worst thing you can do is kind of, you know, be defensive about what you're trying to create. You kind of need to embrace your failings is the wrong word, because I think there's positive failings, but, you know, embrace any inadequacies you may have or any learning you need to do because it's a gift to be able to kind of absorb some of everybody else's expertise into your writing and into informing your own practice. I do it as a producer all the time. I've learned so much from Kenny. You know, I've learned so much from the other producers I've worked with over the years. And I'd like to think that Kenny's learned stuff from us and how we do things in a different way. And it's the same for writers. You know, that doesn't dilute your ability to be integrous as an artist. It informs your ability to be unique as an artist. And I think that's what I would say in terms of an ethereal answer to that question. In a practical sense, just get in a room and play with people. And I know that's harder at the moment, but even a virtual room. I mean, we've been in lockdown. I've probably had more Zoom meetings, more one-on-one meetings talking about the work than probably at any other time, which is brilliant because it allows us to be a little bit creative again and feedback. And then, you know, they go away and they do some rewrites and you come back and you go, oh, we're nearly there. This feels really great. And but highlighting problems that don't make sense as a sort of observer or as a layman that can say, I don't understand. So if I don't understand, an audience won't understand. So somehow we need to fix it. And that's not criticism. That's just about, constructive critique to help your audience understand what's going on. And I've loved that. We've done that, a lot over the last, 5 months now. It's been quite exciting. And I think all the shows that hopefully we roll out will be in better shape because of it.
Are there any shows you're able to tell us about publicly on this platform that are kind of, in process at the moment? I think, it's exciting and probably a little bit reassuring to know that, there are people still working on theatre, because a lot of what makes the news or even social media at the moment is quite negative. So is there anything that you can talk about, even in a general sense, that you're looking at for future, for either Perfect Pitch or for Global?
Yeah, I mean, we're very close to signing off on a deal that will allow us to develop 4 shows with another commercial partner. So Perfect Pitch will develop them, and then Global and another commercial partner will, if we can get them good enough, produce them, and then hopefully they'll have a long-term life as well through a licensing catalog. But the idea of, I can't tell you the shows because they're still in contract negotiations, but the idea being that each of those shows will kind of have a development pipeline that gives it long-term. It gets the writers some money at an early opportunity, which now more than ever is needed. So it's sort of like a commissioning model, but sort of stretched out across a number of years that include a production element within it. So without putting names on shows, we hope that by the end of 2021 we should have at least a couple of really good showcases for people to see, a couple of shows in really good shape. We may even have one production on by then, which hopefully you and James will be helping us with. There's definitely positivity and enthusiasm around getting stuff to happen. And I think in some ways there's a little bit of me that hopes that it's an opportunity for everybody to recalibrate what audiences want and what they, what do we need to do now, and maybe that will include a contemporary musical here and there, and maybe it will give them the chance to be a bit more ambitious because their whole world has changed. So why not build it up now and not assume that your audience needs revivals, and not assume that your audience needs, a Tennessee Williams play every year or whatever. No disrespect, of course, but do you know what I mean? Just maybe the programming can use this opportunity to shake it up a bit, and I feel kind of positive about that. I think audiences are ready for new. You only have to look at how many people watch Netflix and see something. And I think if we make it affordable and accessible and relevant, people will come to the theatre in the same way. They're not going to pay £200 to see something that they know nothing about, of course, but any more than I would pay £200 to watch something on Netflix. You've got to make it affordable and accessible. But I think also the live theatre experience, people will still pay for because they still want to experience those live things. And Six has proven that, if it's good enough and people want it enough, they'll take a punt. And 2 years ago or whatever it was, no one had heard of Six, and there's loads of those. I don't, not loads of Sixes, but there's loads of shows that absolutely deserve the platform that Six has been lucky enough to have. And I think we should try and work out a way to be positive about that in the future. And I'm fully aware that for regional theatres that's going to be really hard to do, because they also need to get some dollars in the bank and hope that they can survive. So I'm fully aware that now might not be the right time for complete risk taking, but equally I think that if the ambition's there, then it should form part of the conversation, I think.
That's brilliant. I think it's really important to be thinking constructively and positively about the future, because it's very easy, I think, for us all to get mired in what's happening now. So that's really exciting.
Talking to my sort of producer colleagues, everyone's assuming this is a hiatus, not nail in the coffin. I think
Right.
we're all still approaching it with that mindset. We know it's going to be difficult, we know it's going to be challenging, and we know there's going to be casualties, but it's just a case of we're hoping we can get through whatever this ends up being, and at least start doing some stuff in the not too distant future.
I just want to talk about casting a little bit, because we get so many questions on this platform to producers and directors and casting directors about what it is that people are looking for in the room, and people have heard us talk enough about it. So I wanted to ask you and Wendy have always been in projects we've worked with you on, incredibly involved, certainly at the final stage of casting. And I know that for a long time you did your own casting for all of your productions. Is it something that you have enjoyed doing? And do you miss being in the room for the whole process?
Yeah, I love it. I love being in the room. Yeah, I mean, I was in all the room from all of the initial, or most of the initial 6 stuff.
Yeah.
I think I might have missed the odd day or half day here and there. And certainly early on in the process, we were there. Just because there's nothing better than seeing somebody's version of the character come to life. And that's the first place where you see it, because once they've done their 2-minute audition song and whatever else you've asked them in their dance call, if you get to the stage where you go, well, there's something in this performer that might fit, that's when you get to see the words come off the page and the song get its first interpretation and all of that. So I've always been a big fan of getting in the room and helping the performer inform the show and the show inform the performer. And I think that's what's brilliant about theatre in general, and that's what's great about 6 is that the characters are designed to be the performer. Everybody is, you inhabit it in the way you want to inhabit it, and you can't do that with every role, but certainly the different takes on different characters are wonderful to see, and the more you can be around it, the better. So yeah, I love being in the room, and I miss it when I'm not there.
And what for you at the final stage, no matter what the project, what are the standout qualities for you in that person before you say they're the person I want to offer the job to?
Potential for growth, I think, is really important. I think because some people come and nail it every time, and you kind of go, okay, let's try it like this, and they do the same nailed on version, and and what I think is wonderful about the creative process is seeing the evolution of somebody build a character without a predetermined version of what's in their head this character is. And that goes back to the collaboration thing. When the director or associate director or casting director is talking to you in the room, listen to every word and absorb every word, because they know what they want and they know how they think they can get it from you. And I know it's really easy to say that because there's nerves and there's a million other insecurities, and I say that full in the knowledge I could never do what actors do. So I'm hats off to anyone who does it. But the more you can listen and the more you can absorb, it's all there. They're almost giving you a roadmap to how they feel you will get the best version of your performance into that room, so that by the time we come in, or by the time anyone else comes in, there's a confidence and there's a sense of ownership of it, as opposed to a fear of it, or a fear of, am I doing it right, or am I doing it how you want it? It's more about hearing who the character is off the page, and then hearing what the people in the room are advising you, and then trying to own that, and then knowing that when we get into a rehearsal room, there's some more room to grow. That's kind of, I guess, what we're looking for. And everybody does casting processes differently, but some have more rigid needs, whether it's vocally, whether it's dance wise, whether it's looks, whether it's height, for pre-existing costumes or whatever it might, you never know, and everybody does things in a different way. So it's always about talent, but often not about talent. And I think that's probably a mantra that if I were a performer, I'd be going, if I do my best and I don't get it, it doesn't mean that I'm no good. It just means for that version, that's not what they wanted. Because I think I find myself often broken-hearted of people you've had to let go, because they're so brilliant, and yet they're just not what you need to fit the wider picture of what you're doing, particularly with Six, because it is a picture. It's a group. It's a girl band, and it must have every type of person in it almost. Do you know what I mean? And it demands that, and you can let people go that just at that time in that moment don't quite fit that group, and that's tough.
It's always hard letting people go, but particularly you and Wendy have always been brilliant about saying, we saw this person, we'd love to bring them back in for something else. And I think that's something we've been talking about a lot on here is, just because you didn't get that audition or you think that didn't go well, those creative teams, producers, directors, casting directors, they remember you from an audition. And, there's those people you think, I just really want them to book a job somewhere because they're so good. And you see them for like 2 or 3 things, and then you're able to bring them in for that one job that they nail, and that's really exciting. But producers do it too.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And we have people in our minds of going, you're not going to get this job, but we know what might work for you, particularly when you've got 4 or 5 projects up your sleeve.
Yeah.
You've sometimes got an idea, and you hope that then they come back in the room and deliver what you think they're capable of. And that is often the case, because you sort of, if you read them right, that you sort of pick up on their characterization, and you go, they'd be perfect for that, or another show. I think the other thing, just and I say this really honestly, is creative people want to work with nice creative people, and we've done this thing. I've probably given away secrets here, but we often leave somebody out of the room that you think might be auditioning, and they're not. They're just sitting there listening to everybody talking about each other and how they interact with each other, and who feels supportive and who feels diva-ish, and all of those things. And that's a thing, I whether it's appropriate or right, and I don't know, but it just feels like everybody should just support each other, and if we get a vibe that somebody's not, that's as big a turn off for us as any fluffed line or cracked note. It's not, it's hard to decide you're going to spend a really long process with somebody that you think might be not very nice, or has demonstrated behavior that you think is not appropriate or right. So and fortunately it's few and far between, I have to say. You generally support, performers are really supportive of each other, and particularly in Six, they all sit and listen to each other, and they all rally round, and they're vibing off each other, and it's wonderful, and it is a real good energy. And I'd love every sort of performer to buy into that world where it's not about them, because actually it takes that pressure off. It takes that pressure off it being all about you, which has to be the hardest thing, surely, as an auditionee coming in the room. Your name, it's your name on that list at 2:10, and in you go, and you're like, okay, everybody's looking at me. The idea of it being not just about you, and it being about all of us and the team, and working together to get the best out of Mr. or Mrs. 2:10 is what it's all about. And I think that's kind of where, that's how I see it.
It's really
all about collaboration.
Yeah, exactly. Just going very briefly across to kind of the globalization of Six, are there different processes or ways or language that you've kind of encountered in producing this or co-producing this across different countries? Like, did you find working with American creatives very different to working here? Do they have different processes? I know the Australian production is set up slightly differently, but do you find that actually this is not like producing in the UK, or is it pretty transferable?
I think there's a whole set of things that you need to learn, like the unions in America. I think there's something like 17 different unions to be able to produce in America that you have to speak to get a show on Broadway.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, Kevin McCullum, our co-producer in America, is well versed in how to deal with all of those things, but it it's a minefield, and it's a huge amounts of negotiation and huge amounts of rule this and clause that says you can and can't do pretty much everything. We joke about getting charged for using toilet rolls in theaters, but this is a whole other level that I've not experienced before, and not always to the benefit of the show or the people who they represent. I've also found, and that I say that as a latent observer looking in, going, that's not in their interests for that clause to be invoked. It doesn't make sense, particularly not in the current climate and in today's contemporary world. I think there's a time to kind of maybe reassess those sorts of things. But in terms of transferring over, no, look, I mean, Americans are super passionate, as we know, about everything, but in particular theatre. And I think we've found what I think is great about Six, and talk about the globalization, is I think producers have a habit of doing things how they've done because they feel comfortable, in the same way as a performer might sing a song in a certain way, or you might do a certain process for casting. And I think what's been great about Six is that, and Toby and Lucy have led the way in this for sure, of just being open to new ideas about how things can happen or how things should happen. And I think we've, at a producing level, have managed to do that with our producing partners around the world, generally 99% of the time at least, to kind of encourage them that there's a new way of thinking, and that certain things that may not have been important before are now really important, and things that were really important before just don't really matter. And I think that's what's been wonderful about it. And that's a common language. It's a common language of understanding, access, for one, being a really good example. Broadway does access and has a load of initiatives, but it's at the heart of our pricing structure. It's at the heart of our conversation about access. It's at the heart of why anybody should come and see Six, and if they can't, why can't they? Do you know what I mean? And that's not a conversation Broadway is generally acknowledged for having. And I'm not saying we're the only ones having that conversation. I'm just saying that it's really important to us that was part of it. And Kevin and his team went, yeah, okay, if that's important to you, let's look at how we can make these things happen and how we can make it affordable and all of that. And those sorts of things sometimes just get left and they sort of drift away, and it happens later on, once all your premium tickets have sold or whatever. And it kind of but it's absolutely at the beginning of the conversation for us, because our fans are what made the show, and we have to find more fans and allow them access in the same way as those early fans were allowed to come in and get to love it and own it in that way. So it's been great. And I think, I could say the same for Australia. I could say the same for the ships. We've just tried to kind of keep that conversation going and keep a less traditional model of awareness, I suppose.
Yes. Did you manage to
answer that question?
Yeah, and it was great. Did you manage to cruise yet on one of the ships, Andy? I can't remember if you.
I had 3 nights. I had 3 nights. Well, I say I had 3 nights. I think I only had 2 nights on the ship. I had the most bizarre thing when the Bliss was getting set up, where I flew to Miami, stayed over in Miami, flew to Mexico, stayed over in Mexico, got on the ship that morning, sailed for 2 nights back to Miami, and got off the ship. And I think that was all within about 5 days or something like that, which was great for catching up on emails on the plane, but not so great for my jet lag and missing my kids. But apart from that, it was all right. But no, I'd love to go on one properly one day and enjoy the experience. It seems like it was a fun place. I did enjoy my couple of nights there, although I did feel a little bit wobbly coming off.
You got the sick coming off, or when you were on?
No, coming off. So when I came off, I felt like I was still on the boat for about 48 hours afterwards.
Yeah,
which was really
very strange phenomenon.
I felt like I was going like this all around like London and Miami, going, I can't walk properly anymore. Really strange.
So obviously, as somebody who didn't train initially in the arts, I mean, I know Wendy was an actor first. What advice do you have for people who maybe are, through this platform or through this time, have kind of, we're getting engagement from people who aren't necessarily musical theatre trained performers or trained actors who are now interested in moving into this area of the arts. What advice do you have as somebody who can? I know you went and did an MA, but what advice do you have for someone who's moving into a creative role?
As a performer or non-performer?
Both, I suppose.
I think as a non-performer, it's probably well, it's easier and harder. It's easier in the sense that you there's you don't need to be ready to go, if you like, to get a role. So what I did when I as part of my college placement, I had a placement with Battersea Arts Centre, where I did a couple of weeks just getting to know the building and the people in the building and what they were working on and how they worked. And a bit like an intern might, and I did some really rubbish jobs like filling in databases and, the usual stuff. But at the same time, I was able to sit on meetings and I was able to kind of understand. And then the other thing I did was I had a really lovely meeting with a guy called Chris Grady, who is, I guess, a facilitator for creativity is the best way to describe him. But at the time, he was head of licensing for Cameron Macintosh, and I went there just to learn that bit. I didn't know what licensing even meant at that point. And but what he had a lot of sideline things going on, one of which was an initiative called Musical Theatre Matters that he was just setting up, which was a sort of place where producers and venues could get together and talk about musicals. And this was 15 years ago, which has now become Musical Theatre Network, which is now Arts Council funded and is brilliantly run. But Chris set it up, and I was on the original steering group for that, where we were kind of guiding and we were putting in Arts Council applications and all of that sort of stuff. But what it does is, just by throwing myself into that world, opened a lot of doors of people that I could meet and chat to and get to know. And actually a lot of those people I still know and I still work with, and I still call when you need to, or you bump into them at a press night and they tell you, they're doing this, or do you want to get involved in that? So I think for me as a non-performer, I'd say, just grab an opportunity, whether it's for a half day or a coffee, or if you're lucky enough and able to spend a week or a month, shadowing somebody or giving up your time, great. And I appreciate not everybody can do that, but there are really good internships and placements out there, and people want, people who are destined for working in the industry. They want to give them a platform. There are people there who are willing to do that. We are looking for paid interns often, now. Usually they're shorter periods of time, and usually they have to be of a certain age because we can't accommodate too many younger people in the office and stuff. But there are those opportunities. As a performer, don't be afraid to ask, and don't be afraid to self-produce. And I say that in the sense of, you don't have to be a big worldwide producer, but you can film yourself, as many of you or them do. I'm often Googling people to find stuff, or find people that you might think, oh, who do we know that fits this demographic or this style of voice, and you might find a few people on YouTube, and you just never know. So I think be proactive. It's not going to come to you. It's not going to happen without you putting in a lot of hard work and a lot of taking a lot of opportunity. But if I've learned one thing, everything leads to something else. I'll tell you a very quick story about Six. That I took a job in Edinburgh in 2017. It was a general management job because we were doing Perfect Pitch, but we were a bit skint, and as I say, we've got kids and they're expensive and everything else. So I took a general management job on a project that I quite liked the look of, but wasn't excited about going to Edinburgh for a month for. And I took the job, which was okay pay, and I was like, okay, I'll do it. I'll just commit to doing it. Ended up being a slightly bigger job than expected. And at the end of it, it didn't go so well. It didn't get great reviews. I was only managing it, so I didn't have an artistic input. Didn't get great reviews, and it sort of just did its thing and kind of went away. And I was like, wow, I literally did that gig for the money. And then I ended up with needing a new boiler in my flat, and I literally, the money came in and went out in a second. And I was like, so now it was literally just a complete waste of my summer with my children. And but then in the 3 days before I left, I saw Six. And that was kind of, I realized from that moment that sometimes you just got to do stuff. And hope that something good will come out of something. You may not see what it's going to come out of, or what good is going to come out of it. It might be a different version of good, but if I hadn't have been in Edinburgh on that day, we wouldn't even be having this conversation, most likely. And I think, and I'm proud that I was in the room, and I'm proud that I took the job, but I'm also very fortunate and lucky that I was there in the right place at the right time, and took the initiative to say I want that show. And I think you have to do that too, and performers can do that in their own way and take the initiative and set themselves up to be as successful as they can possibly be, and then just keep everything crossed that you're in the right room at the right time.
It's brilliant advice, really brilliant. So just a few last quick fire questions. What's your favorite thing about your job?
I get to see a lot of theatre for free, and I feel very lucky in that sense. When I left college, and in my old job, I saved up a load of money before I left so that I could go back to college. So I was too old to get a grant. I was too old to get a student loan. I was just like, and I didn't. I say too old. I didn't fit the criteria for any of those things at the time, and I saved a load of money and went back to college, and I guess I remember sort of having to decide which out of 5 shows I would go and see, because I could only go and see one of them. And I feel very honoured now that people invite you to come and see stuff. And also there's a thing, I should just say this because I think regional theatres need this more than ever now. Often when you go to a press night, understand that the producer or the venue is subsidising those tickets. And some people can afford to do that. Some people can't afford to do that, but they need to do it to get people in to see the show. So if you go to a regional theatre press night, just understand that if you can pay for your ticket, do. They often do, and I do this now because I'm fortunate to be in a place to do it. But if you can pay for your ticket, pay for your ticket. Because whilst it's a wonderful thing to be able to see theatre for free, I do that. I say that flippantly now because I do it a lot less than I ever used to. But there was a time when people would invite you because they wanted you to put on their show, and that was a wonderful thing because I got to experience some brilliant theatre. I got to experience some awful theatre that has informed what I want to do or will never do, and everything is a learning experience. So I think, that wasn't very quick fire. Sorry.
No, it's good. It's fine. I asked the same thing of Toby and Lucy the other day. What's your 3 favourite things you've seen in the theatre in the last? Well, we can't count the last 5 months, but the 6 months or 12 months leading up to COVID.
Oh gosh. I loved Amelia. I thought that was great. I thought it was brilliant how they married the worlds of, old and new very cleverly, which reminded me of Six in a non-musical sense, although there was bits of music in it. Dear Evan Hansen, I just really enjoyed. Oh gosh, what else?
I'll put you on the spot.
You have. I'm trying to think what resonated with me. Oh gosh, I don't know. Honestly, don't know. I think
you'll think of it when we log off.
I will. Yeah.
You can WhatsApp me. I'll add it to the YouTube.
You can add it later on. Okay.
Amazing. And then finally,
definitely Dear Evan Hansen. I love that.
Yeah, we were due to see it in the summer, but we'll see it when it comes back. And finally, if you have any advice, words of advice for actors right now, maybe feeling a little lost in this kind of hiatus, what advice do you have for people at home right now?
Don't apologize for how you feel would be the first thing. Everybody is dealing with it in different ways, and some people can be uber positive and some people find that really hard, and that's okay. That would be my first bit of advice. Second is be as proactive as you feel you can be. This is brilliant. This, you could sit and watch this all day. Do you know what I mean? And take something away from it. If you have nothing else to do and you can afford to, or just fill your time and space with positive energy, which is what this initiative and others like it are doing. And I think that's brilliant, because there's no right answer into how to deal with this weird life we're living at the moment. And I think, be as positive as you can be, and don't apologize if you can't be, and look out for each other, because I think, you know, there's people struggling, and then there's others who are fine. And I think, yeah, everybody needs a phone call or a text every now and then. I loved the thing Stephen Mulhern went through his phone book and called everybody in his contacts on his phone.
Oh, wow.
Just to say hi. Said, I've got nothing to say to you other than just checking you're okay and I hope you're well, you know. And he went literally through his whole phone book. Do that. Like, you know, who doesn't need to get a phone call from someone they've not heard from for a little while? You know, it'd be lovely. And yeah, so brilliant. 3 little sound bites of what you should do.
Lovely. Final words of advice there. Andy, thank you so much for your time this afternoon. I know it's precious and it is incredibly hot. So thank you so much for answering all of our questions. I'm going to take you out of the live stream just while I take everyone off air, but stay in the studio. I just want to say bye before you leave. But from the Collective Creative Initiative, thank you so much to Andy Barnes.
No worries. Thank you for having me.
Thank you. Guys, don't go anywhere. In just 15 minutes, we have the lovely Jessica Paul. She is here with a money mindset makeover. So looking at ways to utilize your creativity during this time and generally during your performing career to positively attract money into your life and feel empowered through this workshop. So join us. She is here with us in just 15 minutes for the last session of today on CCI. Make sure you are taking to socials to share sessions that you have really enjoyed. We are at CCI 2020 on Twitter and at Collective Creative Initiative on Instagram using the hashtag CCI 2020. We'll see you back in 15 minutes. Thank you so much, guys.